Last week, the electricity minister held a media briefing, this after his visit to the country's power stations. Now, in that address, he spoke about extending the life of old coal-fired power stations. Many are now wondering if that indicates a renewed commitment to coal, which would, if Cabinet approves, contradict the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan and the Energy Action Plans, which both set targets for decommissioning old power stations. And as Professor Swilling has written today in the Daily Maverick, this seeming policy uncertainty now could see international pledges for our just energy transition withdrawn. Professor Swilling from the Centre for Sustainability Transitions at Stellenbosch University joins us now, and he's speaking to us this evening in his academic capacity. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Do you believe, after listening to that briefing last week, that the electricity minister is wanting to change the already laid out policy on coal?
Well, he made it very, very clear that it's his personal view at the moment, and he's going to present this to the cabinet. And it was clear from the way he presented his evidence that he did think that one of the clear options going forward is to keep the old coal-fired power stations going and to not decommission the 11 gigawatts of power that are proposed in the IRP 2019.
Why would he want to reverse what has clearly already been laid out that is going to cost a lot of money?
Well, I think he and government are under an enormous amount of pressure to bring load shedding to an end, and they're going to try everything. And he went around the power stations, and because he's technically trained and a manager, he compiled a clear-cut audit for himself of what needed to be done to turn around each of the power stations so that they achieve their prescribed energy availability factors. And he then also started to question why close down functioning power stations when we need all the power we can get. You can see the logic. What doesn't make a lot of sense is that according to the Energy Action Plan, there's 30 gigawatts of new renewable energy in the pipeline. And if we just get 10 of those within the next 2 years, load shedding will end. And what he has in mind is going to take a lot more than 2 to 3 years to actually materialize. So what's going to happen when we've got enough energy coming onto the grid and we're still spending a lot of money from the fiscus now, which the taxpayer and debt is going to have to pay for, to keep going? It just doesn't quite add up. Not strategic, doesn't make a lot of strategic sense.
In trying to understand the minister's motivation, it's an easy jump to say, well, coal is cheap, and we know it's going to be part of the mix anyway for years to come as we try and make this transition. But you actually are citing research in this article that proves pushing coal-fired power stations past their sell-by date, forcing them to stay open when they're basically on their last legs, is actually the most expensive form of power. Just explain that to us.
It's not the most expensive, but it's more expensive than renewables. Basically, this is true now for most places in the world, and it's true for South Africa. It's cheaper to build new renewable energy infrastructures with battery backup and gas backup than it is to keep the old coal-fired power stations running, especially if they are at low energy availability factors. If you just do the basic calculations, it's pretty clear, and that's because the price of renewables, or the cost of renewables, has dropped almost 90% over the last decade. And that is because there is a global energy transition underway. These technologies have now gone to scale. They're mature. They're not testing anything, and it's true for South Africa. So that's why the Energy Action Plan gives so much emphasis to renewables. It's the cheapest option.
You've also explained in the article that refurbing these old power stations is going to cost a lot of money. How much money would it cost? And really, what are the chances of Treasury approving this money when they've already given so much to Eskom to try and clear some of their debt?
Pravin Gordhan was asked this in a parliamentary question. I can't remember exactly the number that he gave. You might have it. It's enormous. National Treasury's position was articulated in the budget speech. The budget speech said, "Listen, we're going to give Eskom 254 billion in order to pay down its debt, and in return, what Eskom must do is fix what it can, sell what it can, close down what it can, but focus on investing in transmission." And let the private sector invest in the new generation capacity that is required. That's really the Treasury position. It's hard to imagine, especially if they're going to have to increase the debt to GDP ratio, where they're going to get the extra billions that will be required to extend the life of the old coal-fired power stations. And there's no guarantee, even if you spend the money, that they will actually perform as hoped for by the Minister for Electricity.
So give me a bit of an insight. You know, you're worried that this is signalling that he wants to change policy around coal. Has that questioning around our coal policy, has it started to send concerning waves through to the potential investors in our energy supply?
Well, the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan that was approved by Cabinet, it's important to emphasize that, was approved by Cabinet, which is consistent with our nationally determined contribution, which is our climate target, which is also consistent with the National Infrastructure Plan 2050. All of these policies are consistent, and the way investors make decisions is they look at the long term and they look for certainty. Without certainty, they don't take the risk. And this cluster of policies provided, even in a little bit of a turbulent environment full of crises, the level of certainty that was required to get investors to start thinking about how one mobilizes 1.5 trillion rand, which is what the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan suggested is required through to 2030. So it's a lot of money. But there's a lot of evidence that local and international investors were starting to think along those lines. What I worry about is that they might look at what the Minister of Electricity has said and said, well, this contradicts what the President said last July, contradicts the policies. You know, exactly how much support does the Minister of Electricity have in the Cabinet? That's the question that's going to be on their minds. And as the Minister said, it's up to Cabinet to decide. So that's what we need to wait for. And it needs to happen soon. They can't drag this out.
Yeah, a very important issue. And thank you so much. Fascinating article that you wrote, and great to chat to you this evening. Important issues that we need to engage with around our energy future. Professor Swilling of the Centre for Sustainability Transitions at Stellenbosch University.